Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the state of the super titles is current group editor Paul Kaminski. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Anthony, glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. This is great to talk Superman. I love doing that.
This is really exciting. I'm honored to have you here. And I just have to tell you right at the top here that as someone who grew up reading and loving the Triangle era of Superman and revisiting the Triangle era for this podcast over recent years, man, have I been delighted by the current Superman books. We have a robust Daily Planet staff, Perry White running for mayor out of Bibbo's Bar, the return of Lena Luthor from Continuity Purgatory, and most recently, a very substantial direct acknowledgement of Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey, including the return of Radiant. I mean, I really cannot stress to you how pleased I have been with all of this. So to you and all of the teams that you've been working with, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm really happy to hear it resonate with someone. Sometimes I feel, it's funny. It can be a very solitary feeling job sometimes. Not just for the talent who are sort of working in their homes all across the world, but for editors too, who just kind of sit here with our computers and hope and pray that people like what we do. I know what I like about the franchise, and that helps me with my North Star on approach to series and story and stuff. And Triangle Era is definitely up there. I mean, that was the first graphic novel I ever owned as a kid was Death of Superman, which is right around Triangle. And so that particular era has a special place in my heart. I also deeply love, and whenever I'm asked about it, the sort of Joe Kelly, McGinnis, Loeb, sort of late 90s, early 2000s stuff. That is stuff that is really, I find, underappreciated and genuinely like kind of what I like about superhero comics just in general. And so we channel a lot of that and a lot of Triangle in what we do these days. And I'm happy to hear it's acknowledged and appreciated.
My friend, you were very much in the right place. So going all the way back to the beginning of this podcast, episodes 2 and 3, we devoted to the Loeb Kelly era. We've done multiple Triangle era events. And actually for our next half a dozen episodes or so, we're going to be revisiting the Loeb Kelly era once again. We're very much aligned on all of that. That was one of the things I was going to ask you about your Superman fan journey. So you mentioned that Death of Superman graphic novel. Was that your first exposure to the character generally, or had you experienced the character in other media prior to that?
Yeah, it was Christopher Reeve movies that I have very distinct memories of the VHS tapes and watching those, particularly 2 and 3, religiously. And it was the George Reeves show because my dad loved that Superman. And so I would watch that with my dad, and I would watch the movies on VHS tapes, and that just ingrained in me. I had the little superpowers figure, and my mom always tells me the story of how one time I tried to cut my bowl cut bangs into an S shape so that I could be Superman on the playground, and I would like wear my pajamas under the, like a lot of kids do, play Superman. So that was really the first. But as like a comics reader, I was reading other stuff growing up, but I got the Death of Superman trade. That was the first graphic novel I ever read. And it's a weird trade to get because it's the most famous modern Superman story, arguably the most famous Superman story, period. And I might even make that argument. But it is also kind of weird because the tone is sort of dour in that he dies. So that's weird. And also, like, the cast is kind of unusual as far as the rest of the DC universe goes, because once you get there, the Justice League is like Bloodwind and Blue Beetle. And then I have this very distinct memory of that one panel where Supergirl, Matrix Supergirl, gets her, spoiler alert, gets her weird face punched into goop by Doomsday. And I just remember thinking as a kid, like, what's happening here? Like, what is, and I remember feeling very alienated by the universe because I didn't recognize anyone other than like Superman. And then like Batman shows up for a panel to be like, oh man, this looks bad, guys. It's a weird time to come in, but it was huge for the character. Like, he was setting records.
So Loeb Kelly era, Triangle era, Death of Superman, you and I have very similar touchstones. And that's, I'm sure, one of the reasons why the current books really have really resonated with me so much. Now, you and I also, we go way back. You used to shop at the late, great Alternate Realities in Scarsdale, New York. It's been gone a decade now, but I worked there for many years, and that's where I first met you. And this had to be what, mid to late aughts, early 2010s?
Yeah, I went to School of Visual Arts college got a degree in cartooning, if you can believe it, so I could try and be Jim Lee. And I realized I could not be Jim Lee. But I found editorial through production at Archie Comics. And that brought me to Westchester, which brought me to Alternate Realities. So I started, my first day in comics was at Archie as production artist, Boxing Day 2007. And shortly after that, I met our mutual friend, Joe Mersiglio, and Joe brought me to Alternate Realities, and the rest is history. But yeah, I love Steve's shop. I miss his perspective, I guess, on the world. It was a nice store. I miss my pull there. I bought just a lot of comic books from that store.
Yeah, we all miss it dearly, but we treasure that time. And yeah, I'm so glad that we got to meet at that point, and we've stayed in touch over the years. And when I was out in California a few years ago filming my comic shop documentary film, you very graciously invited me to the DC offices and showed me around. And I saw Jeff Johns and Dan DiDio having a meeting, and I passed Jim Lee in the hall, and he waved. It was tremendously exciting. And even my wife, who doesn't follow comics at all, she's heard me mention these names enough times that even she was excited when we passed Jim Lee. So it was a really fun experience and great memory, and I thank you for that. So one of the things I'm curious about is, what was the career path then from Archie to DC? How did you end up there?
Yeah, so I love superhero comics. Like, that was my bread and butter, not just Superman growing up, but I was big on lots of things. The X-Men, I loved. There's eras of Batman that really hit me. I mean, I was a child of the 90s, right? So the Tim Burton Batman movies had a profound effect on me, like everybody else. So superheroes are what I loved. And so anyway, I found the licensed comics at Archie, Sonic the Hedgehog, and then I started up Mega Man, and we did some superhero stuff there. And Archie gave me an outlet for some superhero stuff, but I always had my eye on the big two. And DC had this wacky plan to move out to California in 2015. And at that point, I had been at Archie for quite a while. I was executive editor there. And I felt that I liked it there. I liked my coworkers. I was very grateful for the start they gave me at Archie, particularly my boss, Mike Pellerito, who really took me under his wing in a lot of ways. But I felt like, listen, my path is really in superheroes. And so fortunately for me, serendipity or luck would have it that not everyone would be making the move out to California from DC. So a lot of jobs opened up, and my wife and I were young newlyweds and didn't have any kids to worry about or any of that stuff. So we just were like, all right, let's go. And, my wife wanted to go to Cal Arts for animation. So we went. And I was fortunate enough to get the job. I interviewed a few times, actually, because, I found there's sometimes a difference between the perception of something like Sonic the Hedgehog and superheroes, but there's actually a lot of crossover. a lot of crossover there. But that's what brought me to DC, and I joined the Super Office as an associate editor, and eventually went to the Justice League group as an editor, and in the Batman group as senior editor, and then in 2022 or late 2021, I became group editor of Metropolis Group, which I was very happy about because Superman is the one I wanted. Like, that's the one I was dying to return to. I love Superman so much. He gives me such a sense of comfort, and he kind of sums up everything I love about the medium. The bright colors, the aspiration, the scope. Just as a concept, it really is the DNA of everything I like about comics.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. Now, I guess on a more practical note, what is it exactly that a group editor does, and how is that distinct from being the editor on a book?
Yeah, so I guess I'm technically both. I mean, group editors also edit. So, and this is a question I'm often asked by relatives at Thanksgiving when they're like, "What is it you do?" And I'm like, they're like, "Do you draw it?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Do you write it?" No. And like, well, so an editor it stays with the project from beginning to end. An editor hires the talent, ideally. An editor sets the general tone and course of the characters, sometimes through the hiring of talent, sometimes through suggestion of story. And then also an editor is the person who is in charge of what they call the immutables. So making sure Superman acts like Superman, Batman acts like Batman, retaining these immutable qualities of the characters. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, because there's an old saying, like, if something goes right, the talent did great. If something goes wrong, the editor sucks. So we oftentimes don't get a lot of the credit, but that's okay, because there's other benefits to editorial, like steady work and things like that. It's hard being talent. It really is. It's tough. So I'm with the project from beginning to end as an editor. I'm hiring the artist. Fortunately, I have an art background, so sometimes if I can't articulate what I want on a cover, I'll sketch it out for the artist and say, "Can you do something like this?" Or I think very visually. So a lot of the covers you see, sometimes I repeat myself. There's some Sonic the Hedgehog covers that look a lot like some Justice League covers out there, because I have similar ideas, like, and they tend to repeat themselves at times. But I've learned over the years, it's really best to surround yourself with the best talent you possibly can, because to think that you can do something all yourself is sort of foolish. It's a group thing. So that's what an editor does. And an editor is the one that literally presses print on the. So I did that this morning with the Atom Project number 4. I pressed the print button, that kind of stuff. I'm with it right till the very end. And if there's a problem with it, I have to answer for it. So there's that. And then as a group editor, you are overseeing a franchise of characters. When I first got the gig, there were only 2 editorial groups. There was Metropolis Group and Gotham Group. Gotham Group was Batman and Batman's supporting cast, and Metropolis Group was everything else. Primarily because Batman pays the bills. In a lot of ways. Batman keeps a roof over our heads. We like Batman. Yeah, he's out there, pointy ears, the whole thing. Dance with the Devil, all that. Superman, though, is that's what the stuff I love. I love the superheroes. And so I was really, really lucky, because my group was like, and all of it, here's everything else. So that has changed some. Right now, we've gone back to a 3-group structure. There is a newly formed Themyscira group, which handles Wonder Woman and Teen Titans. But I oversee all the Superman books, Flash, Green Lantern, Justice League, Aquaman, Batman, Superman, World's Finest, so the combo books, Green Arrow, Secret Six, basically a catch-all of the rest of the DC universe. So I'm really I'm like the continuity guy, is the kind of thing. So I directly edit, I don't know, something like 7 to 10 titles, somewhere in that window. 10 would be very high, but something like that. And then I oversee the rest.
Gotcha. So relatively few groups, and I'm not surprised, because I was going through pretty much all of the all-in titles, and I'm like, man, like Paul's all over the place. I see him in most
got a
of
real
his
problem.
books.
Yeah.
No, but
my
I
wife
can
tells me
imagine,
I have a real saying yes problem. Yeah.
no, but I imagine that's a lot to juggle. But I'm sure it must be so gratifying, like you said, to be able to work on these characters that mean so much to you. And on the note of working with the talent, I mean, what is it like getting those Dan Mora pages in? Because when we see the finished product, I mean, it's so gorgeous. Curious, you get to see it earlier in the process.
Yeah, I know how good I have it. I'll put it to you that way. I told Dan the story the other day. There was a flash cover I saw him do when I don't know, 2016, 2017, something like that, that editor at the time, Rebecca Taylor, had commissioned. And it was Flash with his head sort of lobbed off at the forehead and flames erupting from the top. And I remember looking at that cover like, that is one of the most compelling images I've ever seen. I just loved it so much. And yeah, that was Dan Mora. And so, like any good editor, I emailed him immediately. And we started our working relationship on a lot of covers and things. And I was very proud to have brought him over from Boom, where he, got his start, a lot of his start there. Daphne really did wonderful work with him at Boom and stuff. But yeah, Dan is just Dan's a unicorn. He can draw 2 books a month, and they all look amazing. And it's the kind of stuff I like stylistically. It's got that kind of manga-ish flair, sort of like Jorge Jimenez, but not really, because with Dan, it's much more infused with this kind of Jim Lee, Joe Mad sort of enthusiasm perspective. That is exactly the kind of stuff I like. Like, that's my taste, is Dan Mora. So I am very, very aware of how lucky I am to be working with Dan. And I think he's tremendous. So yeah, it's pretty stunning to get those pages because he's fast. He's really fast.
Yeah, it's really something. And I guess on a similar note, especially having been a comic book fan for so long and now getting the opportunity to work with creators who I'm assuming you've admired over the years. I mean, what have been some of the biggest pinch me moments since you've had this gig?
Stanley yelled at me on a voicemail one time. That was awesome.
Oh,
yeah. That was really cool. Cause it's Stan, so true believer. And I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever. We since made up and before he died, of course. But yeah, that was a pinch me. And then Jim, look, Jim Lee, I worshiped him like everybody else. And so to get to work, I have a meeting with Jim later today, and that never gets old because, yeah, I showed him a photo of me at a Wizard World convention when I was 16, maybe 17 with him, like right around when the first Hush came out. And in my like photo album, I wrote at the time, with living legend Jim Lee, and I like underlined it. And I was like, hey, Jim, check it out. I thought you were a living legend when I was 17. So yeah, that's one of them. And then Andy Kubert, he was my favorite artist growing up. I worshiped Andy and still do. And I got to work with Andy. Andy was in the office, and Andy still provides, lots of stuff at DC, feedback on art and things. And it's really nice when your heroes turn out to be good people. And Andy and Jim both are really good people. Andy both great, but Andy's, yeah, that was nice to find out that, oh yeah, you can do great things and not be a jerk.
Yes. So we talked about how the Triangle era holds special meaning for you. I guess to follow up on that, what is it specifically about that period that resonated with you and that you're looking to emulate and have emulated in the books? And then is it safe to say that Superman writer Joshua Williamson shares this with you?
Yeah. Yeah, Josh, definitely. Yeah. Well, I think Josh and I are very aligned in that way. He lives up here in Portland with me as well. And we see each other a lot. And we got to know each other on The Flash when Rebecca Taylor left. I took over Flash with Josh, and then Josh and I moved on to Robin together. We did Damien, that Robin series, and we had a great time. And we really built a rapport. And so when it came time to do Superman, he was the one I wanted to do it with because I felt he had a good sensibility for that sort of thing. So Josh and I are aligned on that continuity stuff, which can be alienating to some. And I'm sort of aware of that and constantly wonder how alienating and how endearing, because for me as a kid growing up, I wanted to be in that world and study it, whether it was hanging in Westchester with the X-Men or hanging in Metropolis, with the Daily Planet stuff. I wanted to be in it. And so there's something about the comic medium that used to be very unique just to the comic medium. Now that the movies and TV have started to emulate it or to great success, but I love that interconnectedness. And so Triangle Air has a lot of that. Also, the stuff after has a lot of that, the Kelly Loeb stuff, because I remember reading that stuff going, wow, it's really great that I'm seeing what Natasha Irons does. She's not a one note thing anymore. Not that she ever was really one note, but like you kind of got the sense that Steele's lab was like a real place. And these characters were all moving through this shared space together. And Josh and I are very much aligned in that way of thinking. So it becomes a balance, and how much is too much, how much accessibility is needed. We don't always get the mixture right, but we try. So that's the main thing, I think.
Yeah, I echo that. I would say, that interconnectedness and that supporting cast, I think that really went such a long way towards making Metropolis feel like this lived-in world. And like I said, I mean, I'm feeling that in the books now, and that's why I feel so at home with it. I said this in other episodes. I mean, I could have easily read an entire miniseries about Perry White's mayoral campaign.
Yeah, me too.
And I know it's one of those things when you talk about finding that right balance. A big difference between the Triangle era and now is that you are, though the line is growing, but you are more limited in the number of titles that you have, right? Those Triangle era creators had a lot of real estate with 4 monthly books and a quarterly title as well. So I know that it's probably more difficult to find the space for it. But on the note of Perry running for mayor, what was the inspiration for that? Was it? Well, let me let you answer first.
Well, no, go ahead.
No,
I'm curious. I'm curious your thoughts.
No, because you mentioned being a fan of the George Reeves series, and there is a mention in the Crime Wave episode of season 1. It's in the opening narration. It's just narration. It mentions Perry White, former mayor of Metropolis. And it's like, what, he was the mayor before this? And it's just this fleeting mention, but it has been stuck in my head. And I always love the idea. And I know Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, I believe was one of their alternate reality episodes where he's mayor or he's running for mayor. So I was just curious if either of those were an inspiration or it just came up, organically.
Oh, well, that's really cool. And I'm going to go in and check that out. You will be sad to hear I did not know about that. Although I've been watching a lot of the George Reeves stuff lately with the kids, and that's been interesting. But
yes,
rewatching it after not having seen it since I was a kid. No, that came from Lois getting a level up. The one of the early things I knew I wanted to do was make Lois editor-in-chief. When I called Josh the first time, he was like, what's on your list of what you want to see accomplished? And I'll tell you my list of what I'd like to accomplish. And I was like, Lois is editor-in-chief, because I think there's story there. And also it's a change without feeling like it's out of left field. It makes sense that the top investigative reporter would become editor-in-chief. And especially if she didn't feel comfortable in the job, then suddenly you have story. And then it becomes a question of what happens to Perry? Because if Lois is editor-in-chief, that implies what's going on. So we had this story where Lex Luthor weaponized Superman's secret identity, and Perry was the first victim of that. Basically, whenever anyone is prompted to remember that Superman and Clark are the same person, their brain turns to mush and stuff. So anyway, we put him in a coma for a while, and then we couldn't keep him in a coma forever. So the idea was, well, if Lois got to level up, why wouldn't we level up Perry? And, it was in an election year, and we thought, well, maybe we could use someone winning that would feel good. So we did that, and yeah, I love Perry as mayor. That whole idea. I love exploring his wife. Like we don't really dig in on that much at all, and in historically speaking, and so that was the inspiration. Lois gets level up, therefore Perry.
I don't want to put you on the spot, and you might have to defer this question, but you mentioned his wife, Alice. Does Keith exist currently? Their adopted son?
We are reckoning with a few of those little continuity hiccups there, and I can't box myself in on that one without consulting the team. We have another one we're working on, actually, which is taking some precedence over that. So, as it turns out, when you reboot a continuity several dozen thousand times, it leads to some inconsistencies. You are about to see a lot of those inconsistencies reckoned with and streamlined. And there's not a plan around that particular character at the moment, but we are working on others. There's one connected to Lana that is especially strange that we are trying to figure out.
Oh, interesting. For whatever it's worth, I'm on my Justice for Pete Ross kick. I feel like this character deserves his day in the sun.
You mean the former president working in a hardware store in Smallville?
I just reread the Jeff Lemire Superboy series right before the New 52, and it's just like a few panels, but apparently Pete Ross was teaching at Smallville High. So yet another chapter, but
the Secret Service are really grappling with that one. They don't.
I'll say this, and you can say as much or as little as you want, but Pete Ross is a big one for me. Alina Luthor was. I couldn't tell you how delighted I was when I saw her pop up again, because I really thought that was it. And because once Infinite Crisis hit, she was gone. She was restored to infant size right at the end of our Worlds at War. We saw her a few times, I think in the Oval Office. Then after Infinite Crisis, that was it. And I thought that was, so to see her show up as this teenager, I was just blown away. That was a very, very pleasant surprise.
That was all Josh. I like Lena a lot. I wound up loving her, actually. I dealt with the other Lena, Lex's sister, in the Superwoman book we did during Rebirth. And that was a cool experience. It really dug in on her character. But more importantly, the characters that surround Lex tell us a lot about Lex himself, and especially how he treats them. And so more than Lena, though, I thought Letitia was an inspired choice. And that was all Josh, too. We realized, like, sometimes I need to kind of get a similar character verbalized to me to understand who the character is. So with Letitia, we used, in my head, I used Lucille Bluth. Because, so when you read that, just Lucille's was in my head when we were doing, because of course somebody like that would give us Lex Luthor, like, of course.
What does a banana even cost, Michael? $10? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, those are great. Yeah, I love Lena. Lena's really cool, and she's going to have more to do. That was an inspired choice of Josh's.
My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one Smallville podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode, and the podcast will continue with more great Smallville and Superman talk even after their series coverage concludes. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself, or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. My last big one, and the audience hears me talk about this all the time. Well, let me just say this. How do you feel from a fan perspective about the character Conduit?
Oh, I love Conduit. I love him. I have a bizarre affection for Conduit. Maybe it's because I had the toy growing up.
It's on the table behind me.
I had it on I change out my situation every now and again, but I had the Conduit. I love him. He can be, I understand why some people may be dismissive. You're also talking to a guy who wound up loving Bloodwind. So like, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't have any excuses for myself. We blew Conduit's head clean off his body in the Question recently. That was super fun. It wasn't Kenny inside. It was like the suit was
right
animated. But yeah, I love Conduit. He's so long live Conduit.
One of my favorite villains, and I truly believe very underrated. I guess building off of this, so we've talked about the things that you are a fan of, and it seems like in a lot of instances with Josh in particular, similarly aligned. I guess, have there been instances where maybe it's not so much a matter of needing to maintain continuity or whatnot, but maybe it's more a matter of personal taste, like a creator wants to use a character or explore a dynamic or make a story choice that you just don't particularly like? I guess, how do you navigate a situation like that?
Yeah, that happens. It's tough, right? Because like there's one style of editorial which is just to say no. I always hated getting told no, and still do actually. But I try to find a thing I do like about it and dig in on that. So for example, we have a beat coming up in Superman with Mercy Graves, who I love Mercy. She was an underutilized character for me. So once I got my grubby little mitts on that S-Shield again, I was like, it's all Mercy all the time, baby. Here we go. There was a beat with Mercy that Josh and I had a disagreement about. It's coming up soon. I don't think it's on sale yet, so I couldn't talk about it too much. But basically, it revolved around her and Lex's love story. And Josh is a big pro wrestling guy, and he loves and I was as a kid too. I have touchstones there, but Josh really loves a heel turn, all that stuff. And I was more interested in how she felt about Lex emotionally. And so that Josh and I have the kind of relationship where we can get together and talk about that and get to a place where we both are good with it. And we found that. So you'll see in Superman 24 and 25, you'll see that play out. And that was one of the bits we disagreed on. Actually, if you want to see an argument between Josh and I on the page, you can crack open Batman Superman Annual from 2021. Maybe 2020. It was during the pandemic. It was the series. Josh and I did Batman Superman coming out of like metal time period. And anyway, Josh and I got into this argument about how a fight between Batman and Superman would ultimately play out. And so Josh wound up writing the whole story with himself as Mixie and me as Batmite, I think, or maybe that's the other way around. And when you read that story, it's literally just the argument we had, the whole story. So that whole issue is just the argument we had put to artwork. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing when you can take those kinds of disagreements and make art with them.
Yeah, that's a very elegant solution. No, I like that. I'll have to check that out. Hey, similarly, look, it's such a vast mythology when we're talking about Superman. Are there aspects of it that you have found yourself maybe struggling to access? Like for me, the example I always go back to is magic. I've never really much cared for magic-based stories. Is there anything like that for you?
Yeah, the same. So Waid helped me a lot with that. So Mark Waid, I worked with. Like Mark Waid knows Superman, I think, better than anyone on planet Earth.
Probably fair to say.
So he is an incredible asset. See, he and I worked together since the Archie days. So we've been working together now for 12 years, and we did an Action Weekly together recently, and now he's joining Action Comics and going to be telling the stories of Clark as Superboy in continuity for the first time, setting a lot of that linear story. That's part of the that reason is because I want to see it, but also B, for us editorially to actually understand what happened here, because the origin of Superman is so mucky. I know what I think it is, but there's disagreements at times. Anyway, so we're going to be putting that on the page, but Mark helped unlock DC Magic stuff with me. Basically, like, I still don't think I love it, but I do kind of understand the appeal now, where it is literally just like sort of a different lens through which to view powers. It's more of a tonal thing than anything else. And also Superman's relationship to it. Mark really opened that up for me too. When Mark was just one day told me flat out, he's like, Superman is not vulnerable to magic. ... Any more than anyone else is. Oh, that part. So it's not that he is especially vulnerable to magic. He is just vulnerable to magic in the same way Batman is, or Wonder Woman, or anybody else. That's the distinction. That unlocks something for me. Mark does that all the time. He did that with Gorilla Grodd the other couple months ago, and he just said one thing, and I was like, "Oh, that's who Gorilla Grodd is." Because you think certain people. It's easy to misinterpret their motivations. Mark knows them. What I always say, when Mark puts his fingers on the keyboard, the DC universe spills out of his hands. So it's an incredible asset to have.
Oh, that's really cool. I'm convinced if I do this podcast long enough, eventually I'll come to love the magic-based stories as well.
Whatever. I actually don't love them. I think they're okay. The new Zatanna book's great. Like there's things that are done with them. I don't know. I don't particularly love that bit because I'm not sort of gothy by nature. But yeah, I don't know. They're fun. They can be fun.
I have to say, though, I was tremendously excited to see the announcement about that forthcoming Action Comic storyline focusing on Clark as Superboy. My first question is, we spent months on this podcast last year exploring Clark's history as Superboy. Oh. And so I'm just wondering, and I'm not really being serious logically, I know the answer is no, but did we manifest this? Because this is kind of a running joke amongst our audience members here. Did we will this into existence somehow? I know really it was just a coincidence, but...
It is a coincidence, but we're on the same page. We're on the same page. I mean, you and I are about the same age, yeah. And we have similar sensibilities. With this one, it was like, because right now, and I don't know if I've ever actually said this out loud outside of DC, but there's really only two issues that quantify what Superman's canonical origin is right now. It's Action 1077 and 1078. Or, sorry, 977 and 978. They're the ones with the Andy Kubert covers.
Are these the ones? I'm sorry. Are these the ones right after that Reborn storyline during the Rebirth era?
Excellent memory.
Gotcha. I
Yes. Yes, those are exactly what they are. And we did that because we were combining at the time New 52 Clark and pre 52 Clark. So we had to kind of set something. And so his canonical origin right now is detailed in those issues. And that's what I kind of use as the North Star. It's a mixture of all of the origins with Jeff's and Gary's secret origin as the primary basis. But obviously there are deviations from that, as there has to be. So this Action thing will be a big deviation on that, because at the time we were forbidden from mentioning the Legion or anything like that and stuff. So we're really going to do it, and Mark's really going to do it, which I'm really excited about. Also because it gives us another chance to kind of get a Super Sons book without a Super Sons, because young Clark has similar aesthetic and tonal leanings as his son. So that's what I'm very excited about. And I was amazed to see the artwork come in on that from Skywood Patridge. Brittany Holzer is the editor on that, on Action. I had to give Action up because I was just editing too many titles. So right now I'm monitoring what they're doing, but I'm editor. Brittany is the editor on that. So that one's one I'm really excited about.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that exploration. I think there's so much potential there. And yeah, we've talked a lot about the various tellings of the origin, and we've talked a ton about DC's various crises, and we've tried to make sense of all of that. I mean, thankfully, we don't have to come up with the answers like you do. we can just we can just speculate. But I am familiar with that two-parter, and I remember, and there was imagery that was very evocative of the Secret Origin storyline, but it did not include that Superboy piece. And then I don't know if anyone else does. I do put a lot of stock in Doomsday Clock, which reinstated that portion. So I've been working under the assumption that we're generally in Secret Origin territory, but I know just from the little flashbacks, I know you're shaking your head, so maybe not, but
no, more or less. Yeah, more or less.
But well, and on that note, I know in the little flashbacks that we've seen in the books recently of Clark's time as Superboy, it seems that he was a publicly facing Superboy. There was the sign, right? Home of welcome to Smallville, home of Superboy, which was not the case in Secret Origin. All that to say, I'm excited to see all of this laid out and explored, and it's very exciting.
Yeah, Mark Waid he's going to do it. The first salvo in that is the Summer of Superman special, which is out in April, from Mark Waid, Josh Williamson, Dan Slott, and drawn by Jorge Jimenez. And that is going to really give you the first salvo of groundwork on that. I know I'm mixing metaphors there, but that's going to be Superboy in it. Like when you see how Jorge Jimenez draws Lana Lang, it's like, oh yeah, I can see a book about Clark having to grapple with that. Like his feelings as a boy, human boy, basically. I mean, I know he's not human, but he's really actually the most human character in DC Comics, in my opinion. But like he has feelings, right? He has feelings and emotions and stuff. And when you write him as static or too carefully or too perfect, it's just dead on the page. So what I really am looking forward to is seeing a younger Clark not have it all figured out and stumble through things and be attracted to Lana and not know what to do with that, or have it not reciprocated, possibly. Like there's a lot of real potential there. And then that Summer of Superman special is also going to lay the groundwork for what's coming up in Josh's Superman stuff and what's going on in the new Dan Slott book, Superman Unlimited, which is a new ongoing launching in May by Dan Slott and Rafa Albuquerque.
Yeah, I know that was some big news that broke a while back, and I understand the premise will deal with this kryptonite asteroid and then the proliferation of kryptonite and kryptonite weapons. It calls to mind going back to the Loeb Kelly era, that Superman, Batman, Supergirl arc, which started with the kryptonite asteroid hitting Earth. Now that included sort of a number of varieties of kryptonite. I don't know if you can answer this yet. Is in this new series, are we really zeroing in on green, or might there be other variations popping up?
We're zeroing in on green. It's funny you bring that asteroid up. You and Josh are the only two people I've ever heard actually bring that up. Yeah, Slott's funny. That was his big idea. So I've been knocking on his door for a while, and we had some fits and stops. And fortunately, it was able to come together. And so Superman Unlimited #1, that's the big set piece of that. And the kryptonite asteroid is green K. And we're kind of treating it as this massive worldwide difference maker. Like it's like oil or gold or adamantium,
Yeah.
Whatever you got. But like it's a MacGuffin in some ways, but it's also like it's a story driver mostly because we're going to have the natural resource really fall primarily on one place. And that would suddenly create essentially a new, hierarchy in the region, an Emerald City in a lot of ways. And how they're selling that across the globe, what they're doing to weaponize it, what they're doing to better humanity with it, all those questions are fundamental. It wasn't until Dan pitched me on like, okay, imagine Superman is stopping a bank robbery. Okay, he's stopping a bank robbery. I don't know why people are still robbing banks in Metropolis, but they are from time to time. So imagine, okay, and he's stopping them, and the gangsters are running out of the building, and Superman shows up, and he starts picking them up and tying them up and things. But then one of the gangsters runs behind the car and starts loading his Tommy gun and the bullets are glowing green. And it's just like a guy. It's not like Deathstroke or something, it's a guy. It's just a guy. And then I was like, oh, I understand what this is. I understand what that is. Because suddenly that threat is coming from everywhere all the time. It's on your jewelry walking down the street. And that's a problem for Superman. He's going to have to do something about that. So we are zeroing in on this idea of how does Superman react to it, and how does he be proactive about it? And him and John specifically. So that book is going to primarily be a Clark, John, Lois, really a family book in the same kind of vein as the Tomasi Gleason stuff. And I really hope to build out John in there. And actually, sometimes I have these like they're less of story markers for people, but more like images to follow through on. And one of the images I have in my head is John training like Gohan on a mountain to overcome Kryptonite, Green K, and doing so somehow. So that's the goal here, is to like really show this as an exploration of that family unit.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm really looking forward to that. You mentioned earlier about how Batman pays the bills, and there was a decent stretch there where I would go through the solicitations when they were posted every month. And for a while, it was very Batman heavy. And as a Superman fan, I always longed for more. And so I've really been so pleased in recent months, and certainly looking ahead, at how the Superman line has been expanding and feels like more of a driver in the overall output. And the line overall just feels more varied. So I'm grateful for that, because obviously it's my favorite character and I love to see it.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. You notice like once they handed me the keys to that particular car, I started driving that thing. I was like, yeah, baby. So we, the books, they do this during Dawn of DC, like Steelworks and all that. Steelworks was really fun because that literally I was watching the animated series with my daughter, and we were watching that Steel episode, and then it was in the middle of like putting her to bed or something, and I was like, why does his voice sound like my distant relative or something? Like the voice of Steel feels so familiar to me. Why? And I was like, wait a minute, that's Worf. And then that night I emailed Michael Dorn's agent, and I was like, hey, he should write something with Steel. And then it happened. That's how that came together. But it's really coming from this deep love and enthusiasm for Superman and the cast that I have, and certainly others talents, but like Mark, Josh, Dan, those are huge Superman fans. Biggest Superman artist fan I've ever met is Jorge Jimenez. That dude loves that character. One day he's going to draw an amazing super book. Dan Mora, anyway.
Yeah. No, the Summer of Superman initiative, we mentioned obviously Superman, Waid on Action, this Unlimited book. I know Supergirl's getting a new ongoing. There's a Crypto miniseries. Yeah. Philip Kennedy Johnson has talked about a House of L maxi series that I think is coming down the line.
Yeah.
So all exciting stuff. One thing that I will be honest, I do wrestle with a little bit as a fan. And I am a fan, but I do wrestle with a little bit. And this is something that I've probably heard about the most from guests and audience members. And it is the size of the super family at the moment and their base of operations being in Metropolis. Although I know in the Supergirl series, I know she'll be relocating to Midvale. But, that is, and it's one of those things where I say I wrestle with it because I'm glad these characters exist and are in play. And a perfect example is Connor. He was gone from continuity for a long time. Like, I'm glad he's back. I guess I wonder sometimes, is there enough space and play for all of them? And I guess I'm just curious how you approach that and what your goals and your feelings are about that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and one we grapple with too. My instinct was to get them all under the same roof and have them all look sort of similar so that they could feel like a unit, feel like a cohesive thing, as opposed to a more of a scattershot thing. That's why they've all got those jackets. It was to make them feel like they are all part of this House of L kind of, I guess family, but more than that, like they are in a lot of ways a team. And so the hope was there that Action would be the team book, the Superman team book, Justice League for Superman characters. and then Superman would be the one focused on Clark. The way it played out, I hear that a lot, actually. Like Kenan is another good example. Kenan was sort of showing up here and there after his series wrapped that I worked on with Gene Yang. And it was just like he was kind of in the wind, and so was Connor. Connor was like kind of in the wind, and Kara was kind of in the wind. And so we thought, well, let's get them all together. Let's regroup and bring them together. I think now we're more in the sort of era of giving them all now something interesting to do on their own. So Connor, you're going to see in space a bunch in Green Lantern. He's pairing Kyle Rayner and a new character there called Odyssey, who's a sort of a time bandit character. And so Connor's going to be kind of off on his own for a little while. Kara, as you say, is getting her own spin-out book. So yeah, we're not dissipating the family, but my hope there was to establish it and to give some form to it. But I also understand that at a certain point, it is ridiculous that all of these godlike people are in the one city. I mean, there's an absurdity to that, but there's an absurdity to everything we do. So that was more of like a vision thing. That was more of like how do we make these characters feel of a piece? And success or failure is neither. Your mileage may vary.
Yeah, no, I get that rationale, and I appreciate your perspective on it. I know I got to cut you loose. I guess my last question, I've been a big fan of these 30th anniversary specials that have been coming out. I don't know if there's anything you even could answer, but is anything on the books for this year? Well, I guess that would be next year, right? For next year. Yeah, next year. Is that
we've been talking about the wedding. Yeah, this year we got a lot of stuff.
I know. I don't mean to push it, but it is the 30th anniversary of the death of Clark Kent, which featured Conduit. I mean, I'm just putting it out there.
One time, so one of my favorite characters in Superman mythology is Atomic Skull. And one time I pitched our editor-in-chief, Marie, on doing an Atomic Skull one-shot. And she said, and this is true, no, thank you. so if I were to pitch a Conduit special, I'm not sure I'd get that over the plate. But I will say this. You are going to see more Superman stuff this year than ever before. We're going to have more Superman titles. I mean, we're expanding back to 3 monthlies with Action Superman and Superman Unlimited, all three in continuity. So Superman Unlimited is going to play on the family dynamic, Superman, John, Lois, the planet. And then Superman itself is going to be playing into the all-in stuff. So the Scott Snyder meta story, all that, Dark Side, Dark Legion, all that. And then Action tells the story of young Clark. So there's all of those. Plus, as you mentioned, the Philip Kennedy Johnson book is in the mix. Yeah, all those spin-out series. Look, I love Superman. I love pitching Superman stuff. That's about all I can say.
Well, I'm sure I speak on behalf of a lot of fans when I say we appreciate it and we're enjoying it. And I thank you so much for joining me. This was an absolute blast. Is there anything else you want to recommend to folks or anywhere else you want to direct them?
Summer Superman special. That's the big one. Check that out. That's coming soon. We've also got some exciting announcements for Free Comic Book Day. Keep your eyes peeled for Superman stuff happening in July. And then Superman Unlimited, don't sleep on that one. That's really good. I mean, Dan Slott is coming from this after a very, very long time at Marvel. And he is just an ideas machine. And he loves this stuff. Loves it. Loves Superman. Very excited about it. So yeah, the 3 series are going to have a lot of interesting properties that are distinct from one another and yet feel of a piece. So I'm hoping it lands, and honestly, very curious to hear your thoughts on it. Maybe we get back together again after it happens and you tell me what, if it went right, you tell me how great the talent is. If you went wrong, you tell me how much I screwed up.
We talk about a lot of stuff on this show, and the aim always, and this is something the guests and I are always, in lockstep on, is even when something doesn't work for us, we appreciate the work and the effort that went into it and the intention that went into it. So, But yeah, no, I hope we can have another conversation on or off mic about it. And really, thank you so much for joining me. This was a blast.
My pleasure. Long live the atomic skull.
Right on. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, audience. Make sure you come back next week for another all new episode. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the podcast and receive exclusive content, including bonus episodes, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Flat Squirrel Podcasts is home to Digging for Kryptonite and another exciting episode in the adventures of Superman. Please subscribe, rate, and review today, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all